in a meeting of all the important decision makers of this country, when every single person committed in an official manner to ending violence against women, if there was one thing that we dreamt at that time, it was that like a tsunami, men would engage in the subject, and only then that the dream that Phumzile has spoken about run as if there was no tomorrow. Deadline for the death of gender inequality. Otherwise, 81 years to achieve gender parity. I'm just quoting from your speech because I think if we had a dream, it was the dream that can now it has taken root and it can further sink roots, and across the world it can end this gender inequality, beginning here today in this country of 1.2 billion people with a very strong commitment. I really want us to endorse that and cheer that very, very loudly. I come from a family of 4 sisters. Amazingly, I come from a part of this country which today is known for the worst sex ratio. I come from a place where the girl child today is undervalued immensely. And yet, at the time that I was the youngest of 4 sisters, I grew up with elders in my families, fathers, uncles, like somewhat what Rahul talked about, who were deeply gendered. They were deeply gendered, I never heard a loud voice, I never heard any kind of violence, and it was only when I left my family that all the instruments of patriarchy were unleashed against me. And in that part where I was born and brought up, today the social setup has been completely reversed. I never understood where all this violence was coming from. All the founders of faith that I believe in, and all of us believe in, all the Sufis, the Auliyas, the founders of faith, were deeply gendered human beings. There are 3 words in my vocabulary, and all 3 mean humility. One word is ijz, the other word is inkisari, and the third word is ajizi. These were the words that were associated with all the great Sufis and Auliyas and men of religion, whether it was Prophet Muhammad, whether it was Christ, Buddha, or any leaders of movements in religion, deeply, deeply concerned, deeply understanding, deeply respectful. Then, where are we now? And I feel we are at a point that all the goals that have been spoken about by speakers who came ahead of me, all those goals are ahead of us. This movement has been created by the hard work that we have seen in the last 2 years. In fact, I want to take this opportunity to say that for the last 15 years, Dr. Abhijit Das has been working in the area of men working for gender parity when we had not really even begun to think about it. I want to say today that he and his team and all those people who have been dedicated to this issue, we have seen it time and again in our correspondence, who have been pursuing this across the country, across the world, and today in the second engagement in the year 2014 in India, I want to really congratulate everyone who has been a part of it. And what makes me in a way feel very humble is the fact that the working together of so many organizations, the silos have been broken. People have come together regardless of personal domains, personal egos. People have come together and worked together and created this immensely powerful and impressive gathering from across the world, which is going to send a signal, something we could only dream about when we met on the 16th of after the 16th of December 2012. We could only dream that this would happen. But unless, for all the reasons that have been spoken about by Preeti Sudan, by Kate Gilmore, by Rahul Bose, initially introduced by Abhijit and then by Pumzile, all of those reasons that have been articulated by them, for all of these reasons, I think this immense tsunami that has been built up here, this will be the turning point. And we will definitely run for it, and the objective will be there, and we may even live to see the day, I don't know, but we may even live to see the day when gender equality becomes a reality and all of the aspects of violence that have been spoken about are totally obliterated. I want to leave you with a few thoughts. And what better can I do but to leave you with some Sufi philosophy? Let me begin with Rumi. And I give this as a talisman. But before I say that, I have to say that there are two people here that I want to recognize, two people who taught me. And I say that with a lot of humility, both about gender equality and about masculinities. And I refer to Mohini Giri and Kamla Bhasin. And let us give them a big hand. Rumi says, your task is not to seek for love. Your task is not to seek for love, but merely seek and find all the barriers within yourself that you have built against it. Your task is not to seek for love, but merely seek and find all the barriers within yourself that you have built against it. Sell your cleverness and buy bewilderment. I have to repeat it because I think for me, Kamla taught me, Mohini taught me, so many that sell your cleverness and buy bewilderment. And then I want to leave you with a Farsi rubai by a poet saint, Sarmad. Not that well known as Rumi, but I think there is a lot of burden in these lines. Sarmad lies near Jama Masjid. His grave is here in Delhi, maybe just about 5-6 kilometers from where we are sitting. The poet, saint, philosopher, who was the teacher of Dara Shikoh. Dara Shikoh, who was the brother of Aurangzeb, and both of them were executed. And Sarmad says, and I'll say it in Farsi, and I'll also translate it for you. And the burden of this is that shed that load on your shoulders. And Sarmad says, Dar kuwe mughan mausam gul manzil kun. Dar kuwe mughan mausam gul manzil kun. Make the tavern your haven during days of spring. Make the tavern your haven during days of spring. Khud raba dare junu miza ghafil kun. Khud raba dare junu miza ghafil kun. Surrender yourself to madness. Remain oblivious. I'll repeat it so you'll enjoy it more. E khirqae pashmina ke bar ast wabal. Everyone knows pashmina. E khirqae pashmina ke bar ast wabal. This cloak of pashmina is a burden on your shoulder. This cloak of pashmina is a burden on your shoulder. E dosht bine faragate hasil kun. Lighten your shoulder and be free. Make the tavern your haven during days of spring. Make the tavern your haven during days of spring. Surrender yourself to madness. Remain oblivious. This cloak of pashmina is a burden on your shoulder. Lighten your shoulder and be free. So, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, and all the men here and all the men to whom voices will go through the medium of yesterday's Satyamev Jayate program, a very, very strong program, I would say, just lighten that burden. Shed off that cloak of pashmina, even if it is pashmina. It is so wonderful, it's so expensive, it is so elitist. But shed it and be free and enjoy that freedom. This is the invitation and this is the message from me. Thank you so much.
Well, I have only 2 words for what Saida ji says. As in India we say, wah, wah. I would invite all of you to say, wah, wah. So that's the words of appreciation that we have for beautiful poetry, beautiful thoughts, and beautiful words. I think we've heard the call from all our guests of honor, the chairperson of the panel. We have to heed that call. We have to take forward the movement for gender justice. And as Saida ji pointed out, it's a collective movement. It has to include both women and men and all those who are in diversities, in oppression, in any form of disprivilege and disadvantage. We have to move forward together for gender justice. And this call is one that goes out strongly from this symposium. So I would now invite our colleagues from the Global Secretariat of the Men Engaged Coalition to say a few words of thanks and bring this panel to a close. Yoni.
Namaste, everyone, and namaste, my fellow panelists. I'm honored and a bit overwhelmed to be here on stage with you and speaking on behalf of the Global Men Engaged Alliance. I feel myself basically as a channel speaking on behalf of all this, the entire Men Engaged network and just speaking through me, representing them. And I also want to say that I'm here up on the stage together with my colleague Oswaldo, and we're both working for the Global Secretariat of Men Engaged. So as you probably all know, this is the second global symposium on engaging men and boys for gender justice. And there was another one a couple of years ago. There was in 2009 the first global symposium, and it was held in Rio. So at that time, just to sketch a little bit of perspective, there were 600 people present from 50 countries. And it was the first event ever of its kind, bringing together this global movement of organizations, of activists, of governments, of academics working together on gender justice through working with men and boys. And the energy that that event generated was immense. So much networking happened after that, so many new events started after that, so many new activities. And I think that marked a change in the world and in the gender justice work that we're doing already. The Rio Symposium led to a Rio Call of Action, which has to many been a landmark document and been an inspiration. And after the Rio Symposium in 2009, there were many regional symposia, regional events organized, and also similar calls to action developed that were kind of domesticating the ideas to work on gender justice with men and boys at a national level, or at a national level, regional level, or even at a local level. So to talk a little bit about Men Engage, the Global Alliance, it has grown a lot in the last years. We're now over 700 organizations strong. We have regional networks in 6 regions. We have national networks in 30 countries, and of course, there's members working in many, many other countries around the world. New networks are being established. At the moment, one is being established in Lebanon, for example. And also good, I think, to mention is that there's now a global secretariat based in Washington, D.C., where Oswaldo and myself are working, and that we have a global steering committee that is kind of taking, showing some leadership at global level in bringing all these, the members together. Some developments over the past years that I want to share with you. So there's been a steady move in projects and carried out at community level. There is what I think all have seen in the media, there's a lot more stakeholders increasingly being involved. The topic of working with men and boys is getting a lot of attention. Many important lessons have been learned about what approaches actually work to make men and boys change behavior and to change masculinities. And what we also see is that community activities and mainly advocacy work at national level is translating into government policies already, for example, when it comes to paternity leave, to name just one example. And many of you may know the annual Commission on the Status of Women at the United Nations. This year it was about the post-2015 development agenda, and there were as much as 18 events organized about working with men and boys on gender justice. And all of this is a reason to celebrate. But it also brings a responsibility on us to work with men and boys, so to do the work, but also to do it right. And I guess there's just a couple of questions that I want to share with you and give to you to think about, to reflect on during the conference. How do we make sure that this growing attention is meaningful? How do we keep the standard, the quality, and the principles up? And how do we hold each other accountable? So, Men Engage is an alliance, it's a community that stands for gender justice. This includes working with men and boys for the rights and the empowerment of women and girls. And we believe that there is a world to win for men and boys themselves as well. That men can benefit from increasing their roles in caregiving, in having healthy relationships, and in being non-violent, for example. And not to forget that gender inequalities among men, such as on the basis of race, class, age, sexual orientation, or gender identity, are all part of this discussion as well. It's about moving beyond the binary. And that as a global alliance, we aim to address patriarchal power and privileges that some men have over many others. And that men have to stand up and step up for a world that is equal and just for all of us. There are gaps, and these again are some of the questions that I would like to put here on the stage for us all to carry along during the symposium. How can we make sure that we reach large numbers of men and boys to build clout for social change? How can we scale up the activities that we know work? How can we ensure that institutions, like sectors and governments pick this work up? How can men be vocal in their opposition of anti-feminist groups and so-called men's rights groups that are countering women's rights, and also other fundamentalist groups? How can we communicate the opportunities of working with men and boys on gender justice? And how can we make sure that we keep our ultimate goal, which is gender justice, sharp, that it does not become about men and boys, but about gender justice, our ultimate goal? I think that another very important point is that this is a landmark year, basically. The next year especially is going to be 2015, it has been mentioned already, and this is when the global development agenda will be renewed. And we have to make sure, like, how can we make sure actually that this work with men and boys for gender justice is going to be in there? So a couple of action points to take along for this symposium. We're going to develop a Delhi call to action. And some of those gaps will be addressed in that. And it's going to present an agenda to take everything that we've discussed on here, to take it forward. And tomorrow there's going to be a banner up outside where you can individually write down your own pledges of the actions that you are going to take in your individual lives and in your work. I also want to tell you that you can share the video that we're going to show later by going to the Men Engage website, www.menengage.org/film, and there you will find it and you will be able to share it more broadly. So some fun facts about the symposium, and this has already been said. It's just amazing. We came from the Rio Symposium in 2009 where we had 600 participants. This is over 1,100, and now it's 94 countries. As I've heard. And I want to share a fun fact with you, and that's when I looked through the list of people who'd registered, and as you may recall, you were able to click a box and say, which kind of constituency do you represent? So over 1/3 of all the people who registered self-identify more than anything as women's rights representatives. So, yes, I think... So I think very often when we're talking about as men engage, we have to work with women's rights organizations. I think we have to recognize that, to a large part, we're already a community doing this together, and there are diverse organizations working on this. So I just have to round up. I want to close off this part of the session with giving thanks to all those many, many people that have to be thanked for this, and I'm sure I might forget some. So I want to thank the Global Advisory Committee, the Executive Committee, the International Steering Committee, the Program Subcommittee, the Abstract Subcommittee, the South Asia Steering Committee, the India Organizing Committee, the Cultural Committee, the International Advisory Group, the Men Engage Steering Committee, the Program Committee, the Abstract Committee, our partners, including UN Women, UNFPA, UNDP, and many, many of our donor organizations that have been able to support this work. The panelists with me here on stage, the chairperson, the Center for Health and Social Justice for having organized this absolutely amazing, amazing, amazing event, and also all the volunteers that are here supporting us. And most of all, I really, really, really want to thank you for being here and for making this happen together. So thank you. May I ask for the video, please?
Why are you crying? Like, man up.
That's a woman's role. That's not a man's role.
C'est garçon yé. All right? N'importe madame, c'est pour tendre qui ça ou même cap Gio.
Lavamos, planchamos, cocinamos, limpiamos.
Spreading my seed, that's what being a man's supposed to be.
You can't let your woman punk you like that in the streets.
¿Qué tú estás haciendo ahí
cambiándole los pampers al muchacho. Está loco el muchacho. Tú eres el hombre de la casa, de la madre que lo hace.
If you don't keep your wife in line, if she doesn't follow what you say, then you're weak.
We all know that's BS.
I think it's crap.
In my opinion, none of us are born with these ideas.
It's old school, man. You know, it's 1920, 1950 shit, yo.
我不相信这些东西。
الأمور يجب عليها أن تتغير من أجل أن تتحسن الأوضاع.
It's not just idealism that we're discussing. We're discussing real flesh and blood human beings that are your brothers, your sisters.
Domestic violence has really left a permanent mark on my life.
Men still control society on a certain level. I've seen it with my wife, and I've seen her be judged and not be given opportunities.
As a young child, I was always told that, a girl ought to do this. She ought to live this way.
And I don't want my daughter to feel like that.
We want a world where men and women are treated equally.
And to do that, you need to work with men.
We can't just say that gender equality is something that women should work on.
C'est nous-mêmes ensemble qui besoin changer.
We're working with men to improve the lives of women and girls and families and communities.
To change what they think it is to be a man.
To change gender stereotypes, to break social norms, and to promote gender equality.
I ask myself every day, what can I do to be part of the solution?
My father was never there for me, and I don't want to be like that. I want to be different.
Vamos acá. Yo quiero enseñarle que puedo cambiar el mundo. Y si yo le puedo enseñar eso a él, él lo puede enseñar a su hijo. Y para los generations de ahí.
Tout bagay yo ap chanje. Pichi, pichi, pichi.
We as men need to step up.
And we need to support that.
So that we can change the world.